Good evening and welcome. Hello, thank you so much for joining us this evening for our first ever virtual Families Connected speaker series. This series is hosted in partnership with Hermosa Beach City School District, Manhattan Beach Unified School District, and Redondo Beach Unified School District, and South Bay Families Connected and Beach Cities Health District. Unfortunately, we can't be together this evening at Hermosa Valley School, but we're so grateful you can come and join us this evening together. I'd now like to introduce Tom Bakaly.
Thank you, Kim. My name is Tom Bakaly, and I'm the CEO of the Beach Cities Health District. And Kim was my son's principal 7 years ago, so thank you for that, Kim. It's hard to believe that was 7 years ago. It goes by fast. So we're very glad to be able to bring this important topic to you tonight with our partners. Again, I want to emphasize how grateful we are for our partners, South Bay Family Connected and school districts, and very grateful for our partners so that we can bring this to you in virtual format. So this is a first for us. Before I introduce our panelists, I'd like to share a few updates. First of all, May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and we are glad we can kick off our mental well-being programming with this event tonight. We have many virtual events scheduled in May, including a wellness check-in where we're encouraging our Beach Cities community to call their friends and family and neighbors and just check in on their overall well-being. And we know that you're already doing that, but we hope that you'll maybe do that a little more in the month of May. We'll be sending out more information about that in the next week. Tonight, we'd invite you to submit any questions for the panelists through the Q&A and chat functions that you'll find at the bottom of your screen. And we'll be actively monitoring these questions and sending them to the panelists throughout the event. So now I'd like to introduce our speakers. Kevin Sousa is a licensed marriage and family therapist with a private practice in Hermosa Beach. He's also an ocean therapist, the program director of the Jimmy Miller Memorial Foundation, the clinical director of Promises Foundation, Miriam's House, and a PhD candidate at Pacifica Graduate Institute. Kevin is a local musician, as many of us know, and performs regularly with his band at Terranea, and he is the owner-operator of the Hermosa Music Company, along with his wife, Patty. His better half, some might say. Alex Gray is a South Bay native and professional surfer. Outside of surfing, Alex has created a surf therapy group, and we'll be sharing more about that experience tonight. And so with that, I'd like to turn it over to Kevin.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you to Beach Cities Health District. Thank you to Families Connected, South Bay Families Connected, for having me and Alex here this evening. It took a lot of people to put this on, and you know, we've had to go with the flow here with everything that's happening, and we're really excited to be here. Alex and I are just going to have a little conversation about what's happening, what Alex has been through, where we're kind of heading, and how he's dealing with some of the stuff in the pandemic. And then we're going to open it up to some questions and see what's going on out there in the community. We received some pre-registration for this panel, and we're excited to kind of explore and see where everybody's at right now. It's a really unique circumstance we're in. We're living in historic times, and we're very happy to be here and help you kind of get through this a little bit. We know that you're home and watching, and we're glad that we could adapt and do this and be present with you all. So, Alex, I just wanted to say that I don't know if anybody saw in preparation for this, I watched your video a couple times dealing with some of the mental health issues that you've had. I don't even like to say issues, but kind of the mental health experiences that you've had through the course of your young life, and also some of the hardships you've had within your family, and then also in your professional career as a professional surfer. I've known Alex for a really long time, and back coaching when I was at the Miracosta High School surf team, and you were surfing in the South Bay Surf League. So anyway, I'd love to just kind of have you go through some of the things you identified, and we can kind of talk and process that a little bit. So what do you got, Alex?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Beach Cities Health District. Thank you, everybody involved. Kevin, you know, these meetings are always almost two-sided, right? We have incredible connections, and then there's the unfortunate common bonds that sit within it as well. And the video that South Bay Families Connected put out recently, which we've had on Facebook and then through my Instagram and theirs, you know, it's interesting for me to watch. There's a lot of people that responded with, man, I had no idea. And there's almost times where I do interviews like that where I kind of surprise myself and go, yeah, okay, this is real. And I've dealt with my journey, obviously, in my life. And I believe everybody has a story, and I've never believed in luck. I've believed in, you know, facing adversity, resilience, learning to cope with, you know, unexpected circumstances, whether it be this pandemic that we are now globally going through, or if it's an isolating circumstance where you feel completely alone. And in a sense, that's why this has been, you know, not an easier one, but because there is such a large group of people, we can all finally relate. And that's been hard for me in my life. I felt, I don't know, at times, I felt like nobody understands. And I think that we really can, during this pandemic, get through this together. But if you're like me, all of your pre-existing, let's call them issues. I mean, I just call it me, right? You know, Kevin, let's call it you. We're all so hard on ourselves. There's definitions for all of these. Kevin's a professional. I'm simply a person with no letters after my name, but somebody that's gone through it and am finally at a point in my life willing to honestly share. Whereas maybe, you know, 10 years ago, I did not talk about this. I did not face it. I did not expose it. I ran from it. I hid from it. I used my personality to overshadow it. And I used my surfing accolades to show everybody that I was doing okay. Mm-hmm. So here we are today, and I'm happy to continue opening Pandora's box. It's a learning experience for me. It's uncomfortable. I'm sitting here with sweaty palms. My heart is racing a million miles an hour. Surfing large waves is much easier than doing this, but I'm ready. So let's do it, Kevin.
Well, Alex, you brought up some really wonderful things. And I think that adversity and being able to face the things that you face, and we'll get into that in a little bit, you're speaking of being vulnerable, right? And I think sometimes, especially as young men, right, and actually for everybody, vulnerability, we were taught, could be viewed as a weakness, right? And in actuality, vulnerability is a pathway to connection, and that connection leads to intimacy, right? And so I think why your video was so touching and poignant was that you were vulnerable and were able to be intimate with the viewer and let them know part of you, right? And there's actually great strength in that. And I think that that's really encouraging. And what happens is like you said, through that adversity, and there's acceptance and also connection, right? Because those things that we mentioned, being uncomfortable and being able to sit in that is a really beautiful, it's a liminal space, right? There's a lot of talk today about a liminal space and what we're doing in this transitional place where we are being thrust at home together, right? And our ego, we'll get into some of those labels you talked about so we can have this baseline conversation. That false sense of self, that I'm a professional surfer, or I'm a therapist, or I'm a lawyer, or a surfer, or a volleyball player, that's stripped away because we're sitting at home and now I'm just Kevin and you're just Alex and I'm with my family. And that can be painful, right? Because all the things that I did to kind of keep me moving and not facing some of the issues I may have at home with my parents or in my life are now coming up to the surface very quickly. So everything I've kind of pushed down, I'm now faced with, and we get on each other and it creates some tension, you know. Are you experiencing any of that at your house, or how are you dealing with some of that pandemic quarantine life, you know?
Yeah, you know, I sit in the entrepreneur small business group that overnight had 3/4 of everything taken away. And it's hard. It's shocking. We as humans like to be in control. And when it's out of our control, it becomes extremely tough, especially when there's a feeling of loss. And if you are a driven, focused, goal-oriented person who, like myself, self-purpose lies in results. You know, I like.
You seem to have lost Alex temporarily, so I'm going to jump in here. Or have I been lost?
We're talking about loss. Everybody, we're all lost. I think you're out, Kevin. Uh-oh, that's me. That's that. Okay, well, you guys can see me. Hopefully we'll get back to Kevin. Guess I'll just keep the ball rolling here. And every time we text, you can hear my phone. Okay, so you guys can hear me. Thank you. This is our first time doing this. So thanks for sitting with us here. To continue on with the subject that I was on, yeah, it's hard. And if I was to say that I'm okay, I'd be lying. But one of my favorite lines is it's okay to not be okay. And I think all of us are in that situation right now. And we can relate. And so all of these subjects of anxiety, depression, fear, stress, everybody's experiencing them. And, you know, I'm willing to talk about that. I think that we have lost Kevin here, and I'm just going to take this over then. To get into it, so everybody understands, you know, I grew up as a kid who loved every sport imaginable and played soccer, football, basketball, baseball, and then surfing came around. And my brother started surfing. I was like 9 years old. My parents had never surfed, but they supported it. And I just went down this path of, man, how can I do this for a living? And through that passion of surfing, you know, I really became super focused and again, goal-oriented and pursuing a passion as a young kid. And in high school, we went through a tough thing as a family. My brother fell into drug use, and really over the course of around a year, ended up losing his life to that drug use. And any of my emotions that I had experienced, I think I've dealt with anxiety and depression and really insomnia my whole life, but that tipped the scale. And it was my first moment in life of truly having to face the dark. And within my personality, it's one or the other. I'm either extremely happy or extremely the other. And I didn't know it at the time. It's why I'm so open right now. I wish during that time I understood what mental health was. And now, you know, having words for it and labels for it, I think it allows us to connect because we go, yeah, that's what I have. It's just, I didn't know what it was. And living in the unknown was tough. Kevin, welcome back.
Thanks, man.
As you were gone, I just kind of gave a little prompt as to everybody as to my, you know, growing up as a kid, why there's surfboards behind me and charging the path of a professional surf career and, you know, stumbling upon grief and the loss of my brother during high school. And it really hit me in the face with life.
Yeah, I caught the tail end of that, Alex. And you know, we've talked about this quite a bit, you know, that grief and loss and how you go into that darkness and what do we do with those feelings, right? Like, what do we do with those heavy feelings? And when I fall into that pit, do I over-identify with what is happening, right? And you know, I think part of it is when how old were you when your brother passed?
17,
right? So, you know, and then when that happens, there's nothing to fix, right? There's nothing, nobody can say anything to help you get through that. It's just got to be gone through, right? And so finding people to help sit in that space. If I don't do that, I tend to push them down, and then I chase them in other ways. Did you find you were chasing when your brother passed, that you started finding other things to kind of offset that feeling state or move through it?
Biggest mistake I ever made was focusing on anger.
Yeah.
Chris, my brother Chris, was gone, and in the acceptance phase, I couldn't move forward as everything laid out to my childhood dream of being a professional surfer. I couldn't do it sad. I couldn't do it depressed. I couldn't do it lonely. I couldn't do it with the weight of the world on my shoulders.
Yeah.
Happiness, there were glimpses of happiness, but to compete and to perform on a worldwide stage, man, it was getting mad. Like, anger is where I found strength.
Mm-hmm.
And when I got tired of that emotion was when it spilled onto others when they didn't deserve it. I learned how toxic that emotion is. And while it was allowing me to perform, it's very hard to be around. And it's that tea kettle analogy that eventually that steam has to come out.
Right.
And unfortunately for me, it was coming out at the worst times, the most unexpected, on loved ones, friends. I can sit here now and say that I pushed very close, important people in my life away. And I wasn't willing to own it. And now I know apologies go further than I ever imagined.
Mm-hmm.
Explaining to people why, the why, rather than just seeing that side of me, because nobody wants to be around that. I hated myself during that time. Mm-hmm. And that's where I said, okay, it's time for me to face me. And at the end of the day, yes, everything's out of our control, but what's in our control? What's always in our control is how we react. And we will always be defined as a human, how we reacted. And that's a really powerful statement. That was something that I had to sit down and dissect and go, it's not what I do, it's how I react to a situation. And when it's in a powerful way like anger, some people remember you the rest of your life. And it was me learning to control that, to not act impulsively, to not be that heated explosion, and to let it go, sleep on it. Wait until the next day. Maybe, copy and paste that email and don't press send. Don't send a text. Don't get on social media. There was moments where I realized, like, listen, this is the person that I don't want to be. I know people don't want to be around it. So I need to do it on my own. And the scariest thing I've ever done in life is face myself. And that's my journey.
Yeah, that's beautiful, man. I think, anger is a top layer primary emotion, right? And I think sometimes if you go below that anger and actually figure out, it's a primary emotion, right? It's one of the most primitive things we have, and it's a manifestation of a fear, right? So if you look back, what is it that your fear was, right? And then you can go below that, the surface of that. Anxiety is a primary emotion. Depression is a primary emotion. There's something underneath that. And I think having somebody help you kind of go to that place and get there to figure out what the fear is and what is it that I'm really upset about, right? And vote, it seems so simple. I'm upset that my brother is not here anymore, right? But to actually say those words with somebody and go into the depth of that sadness and hurt and upset, which I know you've done, is the way through it, right? When I work with people with grief and loss and their friends, they're really trying to say, they're trying to be kind, but sometimes they can't handle the depth or weight of that sadness or that anger. They're like, oh, you'll get over it, or you'll move on. And it's like, no, you will not. You'll never move on or get over this. This is something that you will be going through. You will develop a different relationship with the grief and loss through the course of this. But there's nothing to get over, right? And I think there's a lot of relief sometimes when people understand that the only way out of this is through, if you're ever out of it, I'm wondering if you were able to kind of see that, or somebody helped you through that, or how you got to that space. I mean, facing yourself, right? Like, it's so easy to say that, but yet to do the work on yourself and do that that's a whole different thing. That's a hero's journey, you know, and you've made it. So how did you get there, dude? It really is. I mean, I know you're kind of rolling your eyes, but this work is not for the faint of heart, right? Like turning inward and going inside and understanding that I can only be happy if I get that from inside of myself, because at some point, all the stuff out here, it goes away, right? I've got to be comfortable with me and who I am. So I've watched you for a very long time, and I've seen your growth and your evolution. So how did you maintain that? How did you get through the process of the grief and loss? And can you talk a little bit about what you're doing with surf therapy when this pandemic's over and we can all go back out into the ocean and use the healing properties of it? What are you doing, and how's it going with that?
You know, yeah, I just realized, you know, part of me is being very selfish, and I was living in the woe me. And as we face ourselves, you know, the ultimate gift is being able to help somebody by you being able to overcome a hurdle, a speed bump, whatever analogy you want to use. And I wanted to connect with others, you know, in hopes to understand that, hey, life happens, but there's serious consequences out there. And I didn't want anybody to go through what I did surrounding my family, the loss of my brother, the consequences of choice, the choices that he made, which ultimately took his life, the horrible example that I had to witness firsthand to understand what that meant. I just went, you know, there's an easier way here. And it starts simply. And I think that self-care and self-love need to encompass us more than judging others, labeling others, putting others down to make us feel better, because ultimately I was insecure with myself. And what was it that was making me insecure? That anxiety that overcomes me is uncontrollable at times. It's a feeling like my skin is coming off of my bones. It can be a racing feeling, you know, like I just am running at 1,000,000 miles an hour. It can also be a very uncomfortable, I just can't even sit feeling. And my anxiety, and maybe this is clinical, I don't know, is synonymous with depression, because when I go up, there's always a down. For me, the down is depression. It's the part where I'm not motivated. I've lost energy. I've lost the will to walk out the door. I've lost myself, you know, and those are the times where I have to look myself in the face. I sometimes just say my name to remind myself, hey, dude, this is you. And it can be as simple as getting out the door. It can be as simple as forcing yourself to go talk to a friend. For me, this equipment back here, while it's been a platform of a childhood dream, 23-year profession, traveling the world, all the things that make me happy in life, it's also where I go to let these moments, you know, kind of take a break. Because we all deserve breaks. My mental health comes in cycles, and those cycles can be broken. And once you chip away at it, that's it. I just need to chip at it, and then it's broken. And that's surfing for me. And that's where I always go to people and go, what is it for you? What's your passion? Let's start with health. Let's start with something that is healthy for you, something that uplifts you. And within there, who can you surround yourself with that also have that like mind? Because we are only as good as the company that we keep. If you keep yourself at this level and you surround yourself with these people, you're going to stay there. Who are the people that push you to go further? And I have those people in my life. They push me to stay uncomfortable. And it's that little feeling in my stomach. I get these butterflies. And that's when I know that I'm doing the right thing. And that's crazy. Like when I'm uncomfortable and it's like this and it's going, don't do it. That's actually my trigger of, hey, this is you pushing through a boundary right now. Don't fight it. Don't flight. Sink into it. What's there, and how can I use that feeling to do something that I never imagined.
Mm-hmm.
And in my surf career, that's what, took me to, waves and places that it's a small percentage of people that ever really face. But all of these emotions are natural, right? We all have them. We should never be ashamed of having any of these. We should never let them determine us as a human. We should never let it be a cap to our potential as people. We just don't talk about it. Nobody sits and talks like this. I do now. This is the company that I like to keep.
Mm-hmm.
My friendship roster has changed completely. And not out of a, hey, I don't want to be your friend, but I find myself learning how to say no, learning to have boundaries to others, and allowing people in further that I never did. And that's, how I'm moving forward in those moments of paralysis within my anxiety and depression and that.
It's interesting that what you said about like being selfish, right? Like selfish gets a bad rap, and that when you tell people no, you're actually serving a higher part of yourself, right? Like sometimes that selfishness is actually small, I like to call it small s, right? Lowercase s selfish versus capital S selfish, right? Where you're serving the lower part of yourself. If I tell somebody yes, right, that I'll take them to the airport, right? And then I go and I take them to the airport, I go to work and I'm late, and then I blame them for the fact that I've gotten fired from my job, right? It's like I couldn't say no to that person and take care of that higher part of myself. And it's important that we learn how to be selfish and say no to things and set boundaries. And we're not people pleasing so codependently, and I think that you identified that pretty well. And you've learned how to do that. And also you talked about being defined by your emotions at one point, and it's like, you're not Alex, you're not a depressed person, right? You're experiencing depression, right? You're not Alex, an anxious person, you're experiencing some anxiety, just as you're not Alex, a happy person. You're Alex experiencing happiness. You are greater than your thoughts and your feelings. And sometimes when we can sit back and watch those feelings come through us, the ego, again, that false sense of self, is always trying to overly attach to those emotions, to make sense, right? To take control. And you said it very well, like we have very limited, we can't even control what our first thought or feeling is, but we can control the response, right? And you said reaction. I'd like to even go further than that. A reaction, you're talking more about responses, right? Reaction is a visceral, like I react very quickly. You're talking about taking a moment, right? And responding. There's a big difference between a reaction and a response, right? Sometimes, neurobiologically, like information goes in and it hits the amygdala, that fight, flight, or freeze part that you were talking about, right? Do I kill it? Do I run away from it? Or do I just freeze? And it's the oldest part of us. And if we just take a moment to let it get up to higher regions of ourself, that capital S, we can make a better response as opposed to a reaction, right? And then that way I'm not taking things so personally either, right? A lot of the things that are happening today, and I know kind of bringing it back into being home alone with families, we take things so personally. And when we feel slighted, it's like this person's out to get me. I doubt most people wake up in the morning going, I'm really out to get Alex, right? I'm out to get you this morning, right? Today, for the rest of my day. But we take it so personally, and when everybody's usually trying to do the best they can and coping throughout the course of the day, but it's important to give them that emotional ball of energy and say, hey, I'm feeling X, right? You can never be made wrong for what you're experiencing or what you're feeling, and the use of I statements. But if I'm saying you need to do this, or that's kind of a fight, but kind of getting sidetracked from that. But I'd love for you to talk that surfing and that release that you had, that healthy, I don't know if it's addiction is the right word. Is addiction the right word for you with surfing?
100%.
Yeah. So that fills up your tank. It's a healthy experience, right? Like getting out into what we talked about how when you're big wave surfing, what happens with you emotionally? What part of you is in control at that point or not in control? What levers inside of you, what parts of you need to be activated for you to kind of handle that type of environment?
Yeah. To start off, we bring up the word addiction, and I have such a sympathy for that word because, my brother died from addiction, and his was from a taboo. It's from a, something that our society looks at as a negative, which is drug use. I have the same exact gene. I have the same exact feeling that he experienced. I've just put it into surfing. I am so head over heels and beyond addicted. I mean, surfing determines my attitude every day. Surfing determines so much of who I am that I have to do it. And it's real. It's an addiction. But in society, it's an acceptable one. People will go, "Oh, that's great, man. You're addicted to surfing." And then people go, "Oh, your brother was addicted to drugs. It's horrible." And it's like, it's hard for me to differentiate the two. I wish we didn't play on stigma so much. I wish we didn't judge each other and stick to the labels and the emotions and the, I don't know, the way that we perceive, is it good or bad? Addiction is addiction.
Yeah, and I think that addiction, you're talking the judgment, right? And that stigma around mental health, stigma around, and a lot of people self-medicate through the use of drugs and alcohol, and it's a misuse of it,
And it's hard because self-medication right now is so readily available. We talk about the opioid epidemic, which is still going on. There's no such thing as an easy fix. It just doesn't exist. It's all Band-Aids. And you may think in the moment that, yes, you've numbed a feeling. You've curbed something. It's easier. It's there. It did not go away. You just pushed it aside.
Yeah.
And when you come out of that, now it's going to be twice as hard. And that's where I always push people, outside of seeking professional help, which is always number one. Please go seek a therapist, a psychologist, your principal, if you're a student, your parent, your friend. Use them all. But, and there's a purpose for all of them, depending on the extremity of the degree of our mental issue. My walk is that a healthy outlet continues to save my life. I can always turn to surfing, and it's there. It's comforting. I know I have that. I know it's my place. No one can tell me how to do it. It's where I go express myself freely, and it corrects so many of the imbalances that are just racing up here. And I can always say that every time I've gotten out of the water post-surf, I feel better. And a lot of my extremities that were here that I thought were so important and just had so much purpose, they're gone. And, we can probably relate on this. Our mind, we have so much going on that some of it's great. Most of it's just negative space. And my negative space is filled with negative. It is so crazy how good I am at self-sabotage, how much I will put myself down before I lift myself up. I know that that's who I am as a person. And I recognize that, and now I pay less attention to it. And as you learn to pay less attention, the negative space becomes smaller, it becomes less powerful, it becomes less purposeful, and you can kind of wait. Like, I literally laugh at sometimes, I wave at it, I go, "Oh, there's my old friend." It's not my friend I'm going to shake the hand of today. It's my friend that I'm going to wave at, I'm going to walk on the other street. Because I know that that's a dead end. I've been there too many times, and it's never resulted in good. And we have to make mistakes. We have to go down those dead ends to know what they are. And that's why we have to not be so hard on ourselves for failing, for doing something wrong. Unintentionally, if you made a mistake, that's not your fault. And if it hurts someone along the way, apologize. If you hurt yourself along the way, give yourself love. Pick yourself back up. We can always move forward. Continuing to look at the past will pin us. It will define us. Yeah. And it stops a lot of people from going the path that they were truly meant to succeed in. And looking too far forward will keep us away from being clear and present and understanding our self-worth to do what we want, be who we want to be, and create our own happiness.
Yeah.
Because as happy as other people are, what they're doing to fulfill their happiness might not work for me. It might not work for you. Take bits and pieces of everything that's working for everyone else, but then compile it to your snowball and see what that does for you. You know, we have to do it our way at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm. You know, I think you bring up some interesting points, and I use this in my practice all the time. It's like when somebody comes in for the first time, I ask them, I want you to think about how you talk to yourself. And they're like, well, what do you mean? How do I talk to myself, right? And I want you to pay attention. What's the tone and what's the tenor? Is it a negative thing? Am I critical? I found that if I'm critical of myself, I'm critical of the world around me, right? And if I'm critical of myself and the world around me, I'm actually not in acceptance of the way that things are, right? And all judgment and criticism out there in the world is self-judgment and self-criticism. Once I can get a handle on that voice, like you astutely said, I can develop a relationship with it. I like to call that voice the ego voice. It's, again, that false sense of self. It lies to you. It tries to separate things from you, right? It tries to compare. It shoulds, it coulds, it woulds. It's lying to you, right? And those shoulds and coulds and woulds, those are the villains of acceptance, right? Because they're make-believe. It's speculative mindset, right? The other voice we've got is that soul voice, that nurturing voice, that let's go surfing voice, that let's take it easy. Let's go help a friend today, right? Like, and like you astutely said, Alex, the more I feed that voice, right? The more I surf, the more I'm kind to others. I read something that resonates with my soul. That voice gets louder and that ego voice starts to drop a little bit. I really, when I first learned this technique, I literally had to tell that voice, that ego voice to zip it, shut up, right? Like get confrontational about it, because it was so deep-seated in who I was as a person that it ruled, and I was judgmental, and it made me a victim. And in building that soul voice up and nurturing with that kindness, that love, that acceptance, I fed that, and that voice got louder. And all of a sudden, you've got this dropping, right? And you're actually doing brain surgery, right? Like you're moving things away from that left brain, that language, that linear space, and you're moving it into right brain concepts and abstract thinking, right? Where that things like meditation and yoga and illusion and metaphor and feed that soul, and they actually drop that ego voice, right? You suffocate it. Now, it never goes away, right? But I want to develop a relationship with it. And I think once we can tell it to zip it and we're aware of it, then the healing can kind of begin. We move from being a victim to ourselves to a survivor of that voice to kind of just being, you know? We're getting a lot of questions that are starting to come in, which is pretty cool. Let's see where we're at.
Before we go into that, Kevin, I want to push a button here, because I always was like, run away from your ego. Everybody told me ego, you know, you're cocky, it's ego, right? Oh, that person's so egotistical.
Right.
This is the part where I realize everything does serve a purpose. When we go to the big wave part, I'm sorry, because I sidetrack like you. I love talking about this stuff, and these are the conversations that I want to have. It's interesting that there's, 100+ people listening, but this is what I do with my friends. In that big wave world where you're surfing a wave that has the consequence of taking your life, what is it that brings me to my moments where I succeed? And it's preparation, fear, and ego. The preparation is everything I do leading up to that moment. I purposefully am there. When I bring myself into an arena where the consequences are real, I didn't accidentally show up that day. I chose to be there, but I was there 3 months, a year, 5 years prior. Mentally, physically, I trained, I wanted to be there.
Mm-hmm.
You show up, and Mother Nature, whoo, man, she can always put you in your place. And I have always been scared. I've never once showed up to a session, and I have friends that I still don't know, but I watch them and they're just like chomping at the bit. And my first feeling is I am scared. and it's good, because I go, hang on, this is right. You're alive. I know that I'm alive, and I know that I care. I should be scared. Anybody in their right mind should be scared. But I remind myself, I'm like, okay, fear. This is the moment that if I can harness this and I can use it, in a way to uplift myself, to go to that positive space we're talking about. This is where I'm going to do something that I never knew I was capable of.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the mind. That's before I even ride the surfboard. That's before I even jump off the boat. That's before I even paddle off the sand. I have to make that choice. And then it is the ego. I do entertain my ego at that point, because I do need to be everything that Alex Gray has ever been.
Mm-hmm.
And I need to entertain that fire. I need to entertain, that inner warrior, that inner primal person that we evolutionized from. I'm that. And that's when I jump off the sand, I'm not jumping off the sand unless I'm that.
Yeah.
And so I tell people, I say, hey, there is a moment, there is a purpose, and there is a part of ego that, yes, we do need. We should be ourselves. We should give ourselves credit. We should believe in ourselves. And that's the positive ego for me. And that's the button that I kind of push on an athletic side to perform and push through and continue to better my craft, continue to better, what I love most in my life, and to try to keep moving forward.
Yeah, it's funny. We need a healthy ego, but what is that, right? And the healthy ego is stoked in service of the higher self, right? Like, to be successful and to have that confidence, you are serving yourself, but for the greater good, right? For the greater good of self, right? As opposed to doing this to prove a point to who I am. Sometimes it gets conflated, right? I think the positive aspects of ego can take you to those places. The negative, like if I get in too much fear, right, I can't do what you're talking about, right? Then it translates into worry and self-doubt. It's kind of holding the tension of those opposites, right? Like absolute ego and absolute like fear, like getting in the middle of that so that I'm capable of like having the confidence to do the task that's at hand. But, and also being humble, like you said, like being humble with Mother Nature is a healthy ego, right? If I'm not respecting that, that's when I get hurt, right? That's when I can't, if I don't do that, correct?
Well, yeah, and let's bring up the word respect. Respect starts in the household. It starts with your parent. And, as long as we live, we always think that we know more than them. But they and I realize that now. And we fight because they're our parents. But we need to respect them. We need to understand that they're working for us to have a bigger and better life than them. And respect starts in the household, then it moves into the school, with your teachers, your counselors, your principal, into the work with your boss. That's life.
Yeah.
And you have to let the ego go at that point. I have to let warrior Alex down. Whether I'm right or wrong, that respect is the base for me in my life. Respect is the base of anything that's ever happened good in learning more and becoming a bigger person. And we bring respect into Mother Nature, and that's where I've learned why. Because there's always a bigger picture, right? Mm-hmm. And the picture is for the better. Not everything happens for a reason, but really tough circumstances do happen for a reason. It happens for a reason for us to challenge ourselves.
Yeah.
If every single day was good, where would the motivation come from? Where would the gratitude come from? It is, I honestly don't at times know what good is until I face the bad and I come out of it and go, oh my God, there's that gratitude.
Yeah, dude.
Because you become complacent, and if every day was good, we wouldn't have gratitude for that day. We would misuse it. We would overlook it. We wouldn't have appreciation and love like in that moment. Yeah. And that's why it sucks. A lot of these things we're talking about suck, but they serve a purpose. A lot of them are a necessity for us to move through the wall. What is this? The wall. You got to start pushing the bricks out. And those bricks are all of the things we're talking about. And eventually the wall tumbles. But some of the bricks have more concrete around them than others. And you have to sit longer with them and have faith that that brick is going to fall. And we are going to walk through the wall. Patience is in there as well.
Yeah. I think you said the respect is an acceptance, right, of others and how they're and their process, right? Everybody's in their own evolutionary process, right? And it's so easy, again, going back, if I'm judging people, right, then I think I know better. And I don't know better. I don't know what's best for you, Alex, right? I can sit and talk with you and kind of suss out and give you suggestions or share my experience. But in the end, you've got to choose your path and your evolutionary way, right? And that respect is like removing that judgment, right? Like and especially with parents, and it's kind of bringing us into what we're going to talk about next, into some of these questions that are coming out from, you know, parents that are living with their kids right now. And it's funny, when we were talking, when we got some of these questions, Alex, like, I'm not a parent. How can I do any of this stuff, right? Like, how can I relate to this? But you've been a son, and you're a son now, and you deal with your parents, and it's resonating. The board's lighting up with people going like, respect, yes, yeah, you know, it is important that we respect each other and respect where we are at home. And if it starts with parents respecting their children, the children start to respect the parents, right? And that's, we all have to earn it, but we also have to give it and not judge, and understand that everybody's in their own evolutionary process, like I said before. One of these, who and why to own it. Can you get, oh gosh, we're just getting lit up here. So you ready to hit some of these questions? What do you think?
Let's do it. What are you guys thinking out there? I'd love to know. We've been talking a lot.
Okay, so we've got, let's see. How can I best support someone going through a hard time? How can I identify they're struggling? I think the best thing is you know, and I'll talk a moment about, we'll bring Zoom into this right now. This is a wonderful way to communicate, but I found, I do a lot of sessions through this. At the end of the day, I was so like literally exhausted, because there's so many nonverbal cues that we miss when we Zoom, and we're not picking up. Talking to a two-dimensional screen, that you're working so hard, and you're trying to figure out like what's going on, and you're just exhausted, right? So right now, we have to just talk to people, right? If we suspect somebody of struggling, Zoom them, call them on the phone. If they're not answering, talk to people that are in. We want to stay connected, right? Connection is the key to all of this, right? Being connected with each other through this time period. Even though we can't be in the same room with each other, and I really wish we were today, but this works, right? We've made do. We've evolved, and we've gone with the flow here. The best way to identify is what's their body language like, what's their temperament like, are they what's their language like, are they ego driven, are they talking negatively about themselves and being critical of the world around them, are they irritable? You know, those are things that I look for with my friends if they're struggling, right? If it's out of character. What do you do how do you spot friends, or have you seen friends that have been going through a hard time?
What really helped me to truly come from an authentic place of helping somebody else was creating the Surf Therapy Grief Group, and sitting with people sharing an unfortunate common bond is incredible. Again, we talk about loneliness, but to be with somebody who gets it without having to explain anything, it can actually be wordless, is very comforting. But for me to hold space and create a true, safe, trusting place where people could open up without fear of judgment, without the worry of what was going to happen after. What are the repercussions when you vulnerably open up to somebody that, do you know you can trust them? Is it okay to do that? People like to talk. Somebody tells this person, that person tells that person, rumors start, and then the whispers, and it eventually comes back to you. And it tells you, oh, I'm not allowed to do that. I don't want to do that. With anybody struggling, I come from them as a friend. Whether I have known them my whole life, they're a friend from, recently, or I don't know them at all. I come from a place of, what would I want? What would I need? Because when people say they don't get it, that's a lie. How can you not get it? How can you say, I can't imagine? You can, and you do get it. You're just not willing to go there on your own. So you don't put yourself out there to help somebody else. When you come at somebody genuinely, authentically from a place of love, it never fails. Mm-hmm. And us as friends have every right in the world to call their friend out. A real friend is always there for you, right? But always there for you, what does that mean? During the good times. It's always, we're friends. But are you there during now? Let's say now, because we can all relate to right now. Are you there? Because everybody's struggling. And what does that mean to be there? And we know what that is. We just have to get over ourselves. When helping somebody else, the fear is yourself. At times, I'll just say me. Am I saying the right thing? Am I doing the right thing? Am I going to make it worse for them? No. If it's at that point, it doesn't get worse. And all you can do is presence is one thing, Sure, come with a limitation of words. Come with boundaries of what you're going to say to these people. You know what's right or wrong. Listen to that stomach that I talk about. Listen to your gut that tells you when it's wrong. Mm-hmm. And when somebody allows you in, God, accept that. Understand what somebody has given you, and be there. That's a gift. When we actually do let people in, which I rarely do, that's me looking at someone saying, hey, I really do love you. I trust you. And I need your help. I thought that I could go through life without needing anyone's help ever. And you want to talk about destructive? To think that one person can live life on their own is impossible. Mm-hmm. We have to have help from others. And we have to allow people to help us when they want to. My ego doesn't want to allow people in. I want to say, I don't need your help. That's me. I don't need I need your help. I need their help. I need everybody's help. And that's me getting over my ego. So, in helping other people, it's full circle. It's coming at somebody from you as a loving, genuine friend, but it's also in return, it comes back to you as well. Mm-hmm. And yeah, in that grief group, I realized that, listening, right? Listening is overlooked. If you're afraid to know what to say, you don't want to make it worse, show up and give your ears. Sometimes people just need to be listened to. And that's as simple as it gets, and that is so effective. We forget to just listen. Let your ego go. Let your opinions, let the way that you did it, how it worked for you, just listen. And then riff off of that and implement how it worked for you when it's appropriate.
Yeah, man. And I think a question you're leading right in the next question is where some people get, what do I do with a friend that has anxiety or depression? And a lot of it is just sit with them, talk about it, right? It's part of your humanity. These feelings, these information you're getting, that the power of positive thinking drives me crazy, right? Because things are going to happen that are not going to be positive in your life. And then it's like, I judge myself for, I shouldn't feel anxiety. Well, guess what? Here comes more anxiety, right? Or I shouldn't feel sad. Oh, well, guess what? Here comes more sadness. We talked about the more I push away, the more I judge those feelings, the bigger they get. So if I can find friends or a therapist or a family member and parents that are home right now, when my child, we had some questions about, I feel so bad for the seniors in high school right now and the graduations of 8th grade and all this loss of experience that these kids are not going to get right now. What do? We sit with them in their sadness. We normalize it. This is an abnormal time. But normal feelings are coming up, right? That loss, that grief. I'm missing out on this experience. I was working with a client and she asked me, she goes, what was your summer like when you were 17 years old? And I was like, oh my God, it was incredible. And she's being robbed of that this summer, right? And so that empathy has to come and be like, I hear you in that. Oh my God, I'm so sorry you're gonna miss out on that. Let's just be sad. Let's feel the feelings. Let's not over-identify with them. And when I found when I moved to those feelings, especially in the real acute grief and loss feelings, they tend to dissipate. And what it is, and how do I do that? I write about it. I'm sad because of this. I'm feeling this awful. I try to purge it from me. I get it out of me. I talk to people, right? And through that, I'm grateful that you're listening, right? And then that right brain stuff comes in. The gratitude comes in. The soul voice gets louder. The ego starts to drop a little bit. So people that are struggling with anxiety and depression, and this is kind of what's coming up next, how do I have a conversation? We're doing it. I hope that we're modeling for you how to have that conversation. And I will say this about anxiety and depression, and this is helpful to me. It was given to me a long time ago. Anxiety is about the future, right? How I may or may not feel. And that's projecting into what's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen. And if I can get present-centered and aware, right, in the present, everything's kind of okay. Everything's okay. I see you, Alex, right? I can talk to you, right? And then behind me is depression, shoulds, coulds, woulds, all those lies, replaying those things over on thought loops. So I want to get present-centered and aware. I want to get into the day. People say, well, the uncertainty of this pandemic and this liminal space of like, what am I doing? What am I doing? When's it going to end? You know what? All we have is today. All we have is the here and now. All we have is my voice speaking with you, watching you. And people that when we try to when it starts to get ripped away through anxiety, we get oriented to time and place. What am I seeing? What am I feeling? What am I tasting? I tell clients just to name stuff in the room, right? So if I feel like I'm starting to become untethered from the present, right? I just start naming stuff in the room. There's a plant, my guitar's behind me. I can do it when I'm getting frustrated anywhere. And if you actually do it, those of you sitting at home, if you want to do that right now, you'll feel yourself come back into the room and your body will the somatic response, your body will just dip and it will start to relax as you come into the room. The only thing that's really true in the here and now. So do you have any tips on talking to a friend about anxiety or depression? I covered a little bit of it, but.
What's interesting for me is that the more that I own my journey, and we're focusing on the tough stuff, right? All of this comes with an incredible life that I've lived. But I actually got tired of telling people that my life's perfect, that everything's okay. When we start to open that door, and then I start getting into this, other people go, "Oh, you too?" And I'm like, "You too?"
Right.
And we start laughing because there has to be humor in this, right? It's such a serious subject that it takes people's lives. And when you put it that way, that's where we have to be a new example. There has to be a change. We all deserve a full life. I've been a part of terrible mistakes, that life ended too short. I go through my moments of self-doubt. We need to understand that we deserve everything. Everybody comes from different backgrounds, different households, different struggles, different heightened emotions, different roadblocks. But all along the way, we're all human, right, Kevin? We all have these defined emotions. And that's where I say everybody's relatable. And that's where I say nothing happened out of luck.
Mm-hmm.
It happened because of this. And things that I used to think, God, I'm not okay. At times I thought I was a bad person because of these things.
That judgment you're talking about, right?
It's a self-judgment. We talk about judging others, but does anybody ever truly get into just judging ourselves?
Right.
And that's what stops me and my potential. I judge myself. I tell myself, oh no, I'm not capable of that. Mm-hmm. Oh, that might not be as big and great as I thought. When I started the grief group, I had 2 websites that I kept dark. I was going to do it 7 years prior. And due to self-judgment and also listening to others on the way that it had to be before I could do something like that, Kevin, I didn't do it.
Yeah, I know.
And so I ended up just doing it my way. And without an expectation, I let the expectations go. It was awesome. And, one turned into 18 sessions, one member turned into 500. And while those feel good on the ego, really what that is for me, it's motivation to continue pushing because it continues to be an uncomfortable space for me. Mm-hmm. It's hard to show up. It's very hard. During those sessions, I watch people show up in the parking lot and drive away. Mm-hmm. And I honestly don't blame them. There's no schedule to our lives. as much as we want to see the American dream, the way that it's been categorized in shelves for us, you pull at 10 years old, it's this, at 20, it's this, it's not life. And we're all learning that right now globally in this pandemic. We don't know how it's going to go, but we can do a small version of it in increments.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where it's gotten easier for me, knowing that I don't have to go all the way. I can do here and now. I can do next week. I can do tonight. I can do tomorrow. I can do a couple months. I can do a couple years, you know. and that's me, you know. It's the smaller picture, because I overthink everything. My anxiety coincides with overthinking, and I want everything to be incredible. I wanted everybody to like me. I wanted the whole world to love me, and that's impossible. You know, you brought up people pleasing. If we just keep it small and simple, we can do big, incredible things.
Yeah.
And that's what I try to focus on.
Yeah, and I think it's funny that judgment of self, right? And sometimes I'll say to the people I work with, and I have to do it to myself, would I talk to a friend the way that I talk to myself sometimes, right? Would I tell, like, if you came to me and you're like, hey, I got this idea, like, that's stupid, Alex, you could never do that, right? And it's like, what? I would never say that to you. I'd be like, dude, you gotta go for that, right? And it's ironic that if we talk to ourselves the way that we talk to really good friends, we would be nurturing and caring and supportive. And so we really, again, identifying that narrative that we tell ourselves. The problem is when that negative self-talk goes on for so long, those lies that we tell ourselves become our reality, right? Can't, won't, shouldn't, right? And all these negative terms. And then we start projecting it all out into the world around us, right? At home. So this kind of goes into the next question, which is, can you please give us advice to teens on how and why to own it? Yes, because they obfuscate the reality of that. I think, again, modeling for parents at home, like when I make a mistake, I try to relate that to Patty, my wife, and be like, I've erred here, right? Like, there's a difference between an apology and an amends, right? Amends is when I've done something wrong, I identify the behavior, I cop to it, right? I say, hey, I've done this, right? I'm trying to become a better human being. How can I make it right? And what can I do to make it up to you, right? To make it right with you, right? Whereas an apology is actually a little selfish, lower us. I'm like, I'm asking you to forgive me, right? Forgiveness is actually, I think it means to relieve one of a debt, right? I want you to relieve me of the debt that I owe you from being a knucklehead to you, right? Whereas an amends is I've done this, right? I was not kind to you. I'm working on being kind. I hurt you. How can I make it right to you, right? So showing our teens that, how to own their behavior, right? And understand that there's consequences for those behavior, and a lack of respect or a lack of acceptance towards parents or siblings in these really congested times, or where we're all on top of each other. I also liken this quarantine life to like the morale of being on a trip, right? Like a surf trip, right? Like, it's really great, and then all of a sudden you're not getting to your hotel for 8 more hours, and check-in's been delayed, and where are your bags, right? And the morale just plummets. And then the next day it all gets there, and the waves are firing, and everybody's happy, right? So there are peaks and valleys that are happening right now in quarantine with all these families. And it's kind of like we've got to ride them out. We don't want to overly attach to that feeling. Again, witnessing the feeling, witnessing the sadness, and I'm not a sad person, or I'm not a depressed person. I got to ride this quarantine life out, right? It will come to an end, right? And as long as I stay in the moment, things can be pretty good. So I hope that helps with that, answering that question of owning something. How do you own stuff when you mess up, Alex? I guess would be a good question for you.
I'm going to stay, in the I, and this is for, any younger teenagers out there. I wouldn't let myself own a mistake. Own when I hurt somebody, whether I did it on purpose or not knowingly. And so the way that I coped with it, which this is the mistake. This is one of the worst mistakes you can ever make in life. You make up a lie. I would make up a lie in response to everybody asking me, hey, did you do this? And I would curate how I should have done it, how it was supposed to look, And I would say, no, I did this. And it's a complete lie. But it made me feel better.
Yeah.
It allowed me to move forward in life. And by lying to myself that I did not do that. And the picture I painted at times was so believable that people would turn on the other person. Not only did that person lose something from me or lose something because of me, they lost things from other people because I didn't own it. Now that is a terrible way to go through life. You know, not owning yourself and hurting somebody else along the way is unacceptable. It really is.
Yeah.
Having your own issues and hurting yourself is a whole nother thing. Self-harm is exactly not as acceptable. It comes in from a different category, right, Kevin?
Yeah.
We punish ourselves because we feel we failed, or we weren't accepted, or it didn't go our way. And because of that, we punish ourselves.
Yeah.
And that's unacceptable as well, you know. So owning it is so easy, and you don't lose anything. I always thought I was going to lose something. What was I going to lose, Kevin? Let's go back to that word. It was my ego.
Yep.
I lost Alex Gray.
Yeah. Right.
Oh my God, I made a mistake. Oh my God, I made a mistake. Okay, cool. What can I do to make amends? What a great word. And you guys, girls, adults, me, kids, it can come in a form of an apology. I've made an apology for people from 10 years ago. For real. I finally got the guts. And you know what? It was real. That person hated me. Hate's a strong word. That person really did not like me. And watching the change overcome them and the relief in me owning myself, it wasn't that they were still hurt. It was that I was still out there living the lie, and they knew it. And I knew it.
Mm-hmm.
And I did it. I faced it. It feels so good. Holy moly. You want to talk about transformation?
What was that like to that deep connection, right? Over that pain that's been caused. You're relieving, like it's in owning that and letting that person know that I've harmed them, and how can I make it right? You know, it's like that just blew it up for you, correct? Like it was gone. And you probably have a deeper connection with that person now. Yes, maybe.
Oh my God, it's so funny. And you know, it's laughable. It becomes laughable. It's immature, you know. And a lot of my issues came from a personal insecurity and jealousy too. It's bringing jealousy, you know, being jealous of somebody else's success, something I wanted, but I didn't personally achieve. That's awesome. We should commend people. We should applaud people. I mean, how amazing that there are people out there doing what they love, facing adversity, proving people wrong, and making a true difference. You do not need to follow a group of people to make a difference. One person can do it. We've seen it in history, and we see it now. In fact, you know, in our latest generation, kids are speaking. Holy moly. Yeah, have an opinion. You know, speak, stand up for yourself, but even more so, stand up for someone else.
Mm-hmm.
I've always admired somebody who stood up for somebody else. In bullying, you know, I blew it as a kid. I can look back at times I didn't know what bullying was, and I was blowing it.
Mm-hmm.
And I look at kids now who stand up for people that are harming other people, and they intervene, and I'm like, yes, you are wiser than all of us, and you're half my age. Mm-hmm. Age doesn't matter when it comes up to believing, standing up for what you know is right.
Right. That courage and speaking your truth, right? Like, I think that is a selfish act too, but again, that higher self, right? The lower self part hates that, right? Like when your truth is spoken and you stand up for somebody, it is so scary, but on the back end of that, there's connection. There's an altruistic thing. You're actually taking care of yourself and your fellow human being. It's connective, right? And the more we connect, the better off we're going to be, especially through this whole pandemic in isolation. Thanks, Alex. That's a great answer. All right, so we got, oh God, Mr. Miller. Question for Alex: what is scarier, This conversation right now, dropping in at Ghost Trees or Mavericks, or hopping on stage after the Andy Irons movie. And that needs a little background. There was the Jimmy Miller Foundation, which we both have worked for, and Alex is a great ocean therapist as well, and presented the Andy Irons movie, which talked about Andy's struggle with both mental health and substance abuse. And Alex got on stage with Jeff at the conclusion of the show and talked, and it was a really candid, vulnerable experience that you put up there and talked about your grief and loss. And it was, I think it was an incredibly powerful moment. So what's the scariest part of that, Alex? I guess Jeff wants to know.
There's fear within them all, but I think it is good. And actually my lifeline, that moment on stage in front of 500 people at the Hermosa Playhouse, was unexpected. And to cope with, my brother Chris's loss, to understand, for you guys to understand where I went with this, I first of all wanted my parents to know that everything was going to be okay. Seeing them on their hands and knees, broken over a loss that nobody could ever wish upon anybody, and you never expect. There I was, and I was going to be the example that, hey, it's okay. I miss him too, but it's going to be okay. I took crying as a sign of weakness, especially as a male. Crying to me meant that I was not okay. And so I learned, this is nuts. I learned how to stop crying. Man, since my brothers died, that's 16 years ago. Gosh, I've probably cried 7 times, maybe. And what happened that night, which was last year, 2 years ago, actually?
Yeah, I think so too.
I have to bring it to my grief group. If any of you guys are out there, this is, how impactful this has been for me. I let the wall down, and man, I was supposed to get up there and be an ambassador of grief. Mm-hmm. I was an ambassador of choked up, gasping for air, wailing, crying in front of 500 people, that the light was on me, literally a spotlight was on me, and there was a sea of 500 people I couldn't even see, but I knew were there. And in the back of my mind, I was like, this is a movie within a movie. I've watched this. And rather than fight it, which I've done my whole life, I just did it. And if you were there, like, it was 15 minutes.
Yeah, it was a beautiful, man, and it was. And
it
was real.
Here.
Yeah, it was real, man. I thank you for doing that. That's leading by example, right? That's that vulnerability that we talked about, and it wasn't a weakness. It was one of the most courageous things I've ever seen.
Yeah, and it's. I don't know. I'm at a place now, if it's not me and if it's not us and we, then who is it? And I do feel that I owe a debt now to everybody that helped me along the way, that brought me to this place, to now be an example of how I could have done it better. When we say, okay, I wish I would have done it this way, I can't go back to the past, but I can be an example for the next generation on, hey, this is how I wish I did it.
Yeah.
And when it comes from a place of trying to explain to somebody, hey, I wish you would do it this way or that way, when you can authentically and genuinely do it from an I point of view, that's where I try to sit with I now instead of saying you.
Yeah.
You is a push. We use you.
Talk about owning it, right? Talk about owning it, right?
Owning it comes in the form of I.
Yeah.
Adults are afraid to talk to kids, and that part blows me away. And I want, I'd love the respect of the next generation, but like you said, without respecting them, I don't gain their respect. And that's the world we live in now. Things have changed. When I was a young boy, you had to earn your respect. And that took decades in some forms of my life. And I worked at it because I wanted to earn that. we're living in a new era right now where respect isn't earned anymore. And it can be very difficult as an adult right now. And we need to adapt, right? As we're adapting in this pandemic, we have to adapt. Social media has been a huge ripple in the koi pond of interaction, communication. Everything we've talked about, I believe, has been spilled out of the cup a lot due to social media.
Yeah, let's get into that real quick, because there's a lot of, I think, putting ourselves in times of this with family with a social media diet and a news diet is really important, because to what we talked about earlier is what you pay attention to grows. And social media almost feeds that ego voice in as much as it's like comparing. Oh my gosh, this person's doing this person's doing that. Why are they out during quarantine? What are they doing riding their bike down the beach? Blah, blah, blah. Right? Stop. It's like, it's like, how is that helpful to the family at home, right? It's like, but to parents, how do I get my kids off that social media, right? It's an incredibly wonderful tool to connect, but it's at the same time, it can be extremely disconnected, right? So again, parents, depending on the age, it's like we have to monitor, we have to absorb what they're viewing. You by all means should be able to see what they're viewing and what they're into. We want to teach privacy and teach respect again, right? If they are using the freedom wisely, then of course they're allowed to. What is the price? My good friend Dr. Mike Collins, I said, what's the price of freedom to be in the house, right? What are we able to do by we want to have a long leash until something shows that they can't, right? Like life, right? Like you get a lot of respect and a lot of freedom unless you don't go to work, or you don't show up for the job, or you don't commit to something, you don't show up. Some negative consequences happen. So parents need to kind of use that. What is the price of freedom to be in the house, right? To use social media, to kind of to have access to it, and that's all. That should be talked with and upfront, so that there is clearly written out, so that the parents understand and the kids understand what can and can't be seen, and what time frame can be put on social media. You talked a little bit about social media in your lead-up video to this, so love to hear your take on it. I know you were comparing a little bit. That ego voice was building a little bit through some of that.
Yeah, I made money off of social media. I honestly made money on the amount of followers that in increments. It was part of my job. I am part of Instagram when it first started. I used it to build my business. So I know the ins and outs of all of it. And the person that I am going to kind of push to be bigger and better, I've been that person. And it's the guy that wakes up stressed out. We can say girl too, but I'm a guy. That wakes up stressed out, wondering what I'm going to post that day to show everybody how awesome I am. And I almost have 3,000 posts right now. Now, there was a time that I was posting every day in succession. So let's say 1,750 of those days were possibly consecutive. I've been a part of the machine, and that machine ate me alive. Mentally, it was so destructive. The added stress and pressure it put on me to not be in the moment, but be wondering, what was my purpose? Am I doing this because I hope people are going to see it? And it's going to be an applaud to myself as I post it and I see the amount of likes that I get, the amount of comments. That's the reinforcement that, yeah, I killed it today. That's crazy.
Right?
It is, because I'm basing my self-worth off of other people's acknowledgement.
Yeah, validation, right?
Validation, there you go. It's a beautiful word. And then within the comments, I was so sensitive because my self-worth was that picture.
Yeah.
And when somebody would cyberbully and attack me, oh baby, it was on. And I used to respond to people, the dumbest thing you could ever do. You're just giving them what they want. There are people trolling out there who, again, we've talked about this. They don't feel good, so they're going to bring you down. Mm-hmm. Hiding behind a keyboard, I think, is the weakest form of ever harming someone.
Yep.
Right? And you never know who this person is. You'll never meet them. And they're destructively getting to you. And we need to know that. We should not do that to other people. I find myself, I don't comment now. And when I know, I'm like, they're not going to like, I just don't do it.
Yeah.
I got to a place where I'm like, what I'm going to comment is if my grandma, if I was responding to my grandma.
Right.
Everybody needs to understand your future jobs, your future bosses, your future relationships, it's there forever.
Yeah.
Do not let social media define you. Do not let social media harm your path to success. You know, within there, it's like, go live. You know, yeah, this is fun. It's a part of our life. I'm not going to stop doing Instagram.
Yeah, but use social media. Don't let it use you, and don't get in the mud with those people. It's like, how do you put out a fire? I remove the oxygen from it. And anybody wants to comment, don't even look. Like if I see it's negative, I don't even look, right? Because it's like somebody talking behind my back. There's lots of conversations that happen about us behind our backs. That's not my problem. What you think of me is none of my business. You know, even if you're putting it on my Facebook page, right? Not my problem. That's your issue, not mine. And if I put oxygen to it and build that fire, it's negatively going to affect it. And like what you really well said, it's like, don't let social media take you down, right? Like, and have to seek that outside validation, right? It's got to come from inside. It's got to be an inside job, you know? So Alex, we got to wrap up real quick. This has been awesome. I'm so bummed we didn't get to the pre-questions that were asked. We could have done this for a lot longer. Hopefully Beach Cities Health District and South Bay Families Connected will have us back again. I want to thank everybody for having us. We got a couple more minutes for just some closing comments. If you got like 3 or 4 minutes to just wrap it up and how this experience was for you and anything you want to kind of freeform and that you didn't say that you'd like to say right now, floor is all yours, and then I'll wrap it up after that.
I've got all pandemic. Kevin?
Yep.
For those of you, I'm in LA, and our beaches have been closed for 40 some odd days now, and it's hard for people to sympathize with surfers, but to generalize the statement is my healthy outlet, which if you've tuned in this time, you understand how important these surfboards are to me. I haven't had it, and I've struggled immensely during this time, day to day. Last night my insomnia kicked in. There's been lots of rough days in here, and reaching out to people, like Kevin said, it's crazy, but it's what we have. FaceTiming my friends. Conversation is what I need in life. That's who I am. And I wasn't talking to people. I gave into the fear, and I am respecting this. I'm staying safe, and we have what we have in front of us, but we need to adapt. I want everybody to understand that this is a big challenge, but you've been challenged before. I've been challenged before. And while everything I've been working for was finally working out, that got stripped away, am I going to give up? Absolutely not. Am I going to challenge myself to figure out how to do it in a new or different way? Yes. Just because this is going on doesn't mean my dream's over. I'm not giving up on everything I've worked for. It's on pause. But also I want to remind everybody to go slow. My mistake on the first day of this, my anxiety took over, and I went, how do I fix it? How do I get all of this back? We can't. We're moving forward. So the question now is, how do I move forward? How do I do it creatively? How do I challenge myself? How do I grow from this? How can we collectively come out bigger and better? Due to an unfortunate circumstance that I'm so happy to be healthy, I have my family, I'm in my parents' home, I've been spending time with them. 10 years of my life was on the road. I didn't have the family bond that everybody gets, and I'm getting it now. And I have gratitude for that. My mom always says there's blessings in everything. And there are. We need to stay present and clear to allow them to present themselves in front of us. Don't give up on yourself, your friends, your dreams. It's all there. We're going to work with it. We're going to work on it, but the cool thing here, Kevin, is we're doing it together. For once, I believe that the biggest blessing from this is that we are going to move closer together, which we've needed to for a long time.
Yeah, I want to piggyback off that a little bit. We were moving, our culture was moving so fast and so furiously, it felt like almost at breakneck speed. And you know, this is normal. If we look through history, pandemics have happened every century or so. The Spanish influenza, the bubonic plague, malaria outbreaks, bubonic plague again. This is normal. We just never, our generations really haven't sat in it. I think what the opportunity for us that presents itself is, and right before this started happening, I was reading Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, and he was in some of the most unspeakable horrors you could ever imagine. He was in the Holocaust, he was in the prison camps in Auschwitz and some of the other ones. And he came up with logotherapy, and that's where you create healing through meaning, right? And his phrase was that the biggest freedom that you have is to choose your own attitude and to choose one's own way. And I think right now we have the one opportunity when we're stuck at home with each other in this connection cocoon, right? Like, how do I want this to be with my family, right? Am I looking at the things I don't have and the things that I'm missing, or am I living in gratitude? Am I living in how things are actually, right? Can I connect with the smile on my wife's face, or the smell of my daughter's hair, or how my son is learning fractions and I'm helping him, right? Like all those things, like we've got to ask ourselves and stay present, centered, and aware. We will all get through this. We will all get through this together. We will all be connected. Gratitude, love, kindness, those things that we all, I love that we hit those points, Alex, throughout the entire course of this, right? And that's the way through this. You know, I was supposed to play with my band at Beach Life this Saturday, you know, and it's so humbling to just be asked to perform at this festival. And it was such a bummer when I felt taken away and my ego took that hit. And I've got new songs I wanted to perform and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, you know what? Now I'm writing songs, right? I've had to reassign and get into my studio and like get to that creative thing and support other musicians as they go and do their thing out on Instagram and doing their streaming. And now the Hermosa Music Company, we're going to start doing streaming shows and like bring those musicians to life and get them paid and get them taken care of as soon as we can safely do that with this, you know, I think paying attention to our, what's being asked of us to do. We're not being told that we're doing a good enough job by some of our officials. And we have done a really good job of staying at home, being safe, right? It's working. And unfortunately, when it works, it feels like almost nothing's happening, right? And I think the more that we go through this, when the beaches are open, we will be able to surf, we will be able to create, we will be able to stoke each other. And Alex, this was just a real pleasure to sit and talk with you. You've been a good friend for a long amount of years. I remember we did an interview for Swoop magazine. I don't know if you remember, at Dive and Surf. I think, dude, must have been 20 years ago, man. Like, it's crazy. So it was an honor to do this. Hopefully we can do this live with Beach Cities again. Allie, if you guys will let us do it again. Thanks to Tom, thanks to Tessa, thanks to Laura, thanks to Kim, Tiana, who put this all on. Thank you all for joining us. This was just incredible. I hope, am I missing anything? I don't know. We're turning it over to somebody. Here we go. Tessa coming back in. Allie, Tom. No, we wrap it up. So let's see, what time is it? 7:59, dude. Right on time.
I'm too. I had a great time. Kevin, you brought me along this whole journey. You're fantastic. Thank you for everything you do for our family and here in the South Bay. You do so much great work, and I wish I knew the real you when I was younger and was open to all of this. So, everybody, there's tons of Kevins out there. Please seek them out if you're struggling. He has tons of references. There's so much help out there. Do it. It's worth it. We deserve it. You deserve it. Thanks.
Yeah, be good to each other and be kind. Be kind to each other and accepting and loving. And we'll see you next time. On behalf of Beach Cities Health District and South Bay Families Connected, we want to thank you all for being here and joining us this evening. We hope what you heard here, take out of here, pass it on. Okay? Everybody take care. Much love. Peace. Are we clear?